back to the Why Not Now podcast. What's up, Joe? You're looking good today, man.
Oh, thanks, dude. I got some new swag. I always feel really good about myself whenever I get new swag, whether it's socks, whether it's maybe a wrist accessory, maybe I'm using a new hair product that makes me feel good, but that's not what the case is today. It's new swag from P4L, PFL, but it's P4L. I know that, which is our proud sponsor of this podcast, the Why Not Now podcast, and could not be more happy to be here as well on today's podcast, Bryant. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, speaking of all the new swag, what about all this fitness technology that's out there? You know, measuring our heart rates.
I have not learned more about fitness than I have since we started doing our new formatted show. It's actually been like really I actually have learned a lot, especially a lot of things that like all of our guests have said. But like last week when we're talking about like motivation and goal setting, that was like super helpful to me just to break things down when you're setting goals. I mean, I could go on about what we learned, Bryant, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the now, the future.
We are. And speaking of education, I think I'm the most excited I've ever been on this show since we restructured it and focused on fitness tips, because we got the guru, the educator himself, the professor, Mr. Trevor Short. Welcome to the show, man.
What's happening? Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
How's Hawaii, man? Aloha.
Amazing, man. Living in paradise. Couldn't complain. I work hard all day and go surf every night. Life's good.
This guy told me 2 years ago, Joe, he's like, hey, I'm going to end up in Hawaii. I'm going to be a professor. I'm going to get my PhD, and I'm going to surf all day in the afternoon. And his goal has been accomplished 2 years later.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Here we are. Hey, thanks, Joe.
And you're, just the Hawaiian stereotype that everybody wants to be. Just,
living it.
Teach kids, interact with people all day, and then go hit the waves afterwards. That's what it's all about, man. I'll see you soon. Man. I'm planning a trip
anytime.
Once we're through this. I'm going to come see you for sure.
Awesome.
You know what? Where he's at, too, the restrictions are the least amount, I heard, right? On your island compared to like Kauai.
We're at tier 3, so you can have groups of 10. I mean, the bars are open, events are open. You can. We're vibing. We're rolling.
What are we waiting for?
Yeah, anytime. Anytime.
So, Trevor, tell us more about your background in exercise physiology. Today's episode is going to be on the immune system. What can you do to protect yourself from COVID, from SARS, and really from any virus? And it really starts with the physiology. And Trevor is an expert in physiology. He's getting his PhD in exercise phys. Tell us more about your background, man.
Yeah, my background. I think my love with X-Phys started as an athlete in high school. I started to fall in love with the training cycle. I was never too big. I played football, and it was a tool to get me on the field and get me accelerating. So I started to study the mechanics and physiology. It took me to college, where I played football in college and studied kinesiology in college. Following that career, I ended up getting a master's at Humboldt State in Northern California in kinesiology. Came and worked with you in SF for a couple of years. And then finally, I'm finishing out my education journey here at the University of Hawaii, getting my degree in exercise physiology. So I just love phys, man. It really is the recipe for helping people get better. It's the biochemical platform that we all function within, right? And it's incredible to be able to break it down and see how the human body responds to stimulus. That's what it's all about. How do we adapt? How do we respond to stimulus? And that ties really nicely into how does the body adapt to exposure to the SARS-CoV-2 virus, COVID-19, aka, everything that comes with it.
So what's the response like? I mean, how does it start in the body once a year?
Yeah. So I'm sure you guys have heard. Have either of you guys actually had COVID by chance?
No.
Totally random. You haven't. Okay.
Missed out. FOMO. Yeah. Well, it's not gone yet, but yeah.
Not yet, right?
Yeah.
Trevor was an early adopter.
Right. Yeah, you were jumped on the hype bandwagon early.
Yeah.
Man, so I think it's important to start off with, we know that it infects like the upper and lower respiratory tract, right? And a lot of people are losing sense of taste and sense of smell. So I lost my sense of taste in like March. This is early on, like the days of the shutdown. I remember I let Bryant know, Joe, like the 2 days before the announcement came out, like, hey man, I'm feeling funky, I shouldn't go in. And I remember this guy thinking like, oh, he's just taking advantage of this going on. Yeah, but no, I was pretty jacked up. I was out for about 4 days. Like
you had
took
COVID.
Care of me. So we never confirmed. My girlfriend the following week tested positive for COVID.
So
I got her sick pretty easy to deduct reason to say.
Yeah.
So
okay.
but my sense of smell and taste has always been funky. I still can't really smell things. Some
Oh,
things
wow.
taste funky. So the first thing, Brian, to answer your question is, how does COVID interact with us? We know it infects primarily the upper and lower respiratory tract. So it really interacts there. That basically is kind of sensed by receptors on the target cells in our olfactory system and our smell systems and so on. And then that in turn turns into this cytokine response. And cytokines basically are like inflammatory. If you think inflammation, that's kind of like an internal inflammatory response. And it occurs in that area as well as cells around it. So that's like whistleblowers, right? It kind of lets all the cells around it know, and it becomes inflamed. And that inflammation is what causes some of the associated issues with smell and taste to start. So to answer your initial question, how does it interact with our body? We know that it really kind of jacks up our smell, taste, and our lungs, right? And that's where it binds. And that's where those cytokines or the inflammation response goes to. So when it gets inflamed in that area, that's what can lead to the damage. That's like why we can't really recover from that. That area gets damaged, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then with that, we have, the inflammatory response that follows and so on. But it all starts there.
So really the goal is, how do I limit the inflammatory response to the point where it doesn't kill me, or I can bounce back quicker, right? I mean, that's the goal.
Definitely.
That's the takeaway of this episode is, what can we do to limit that inflammatory response so it doesn't take us over the edge?
Yeah, really good question. I think the first thing to consider is, so like mild versus severe cases. So some people have really mild response, some people have a severe response. In the mild responses, the adaptive immune system kind of eliminates the virus, you could say. The patient just recovers quickly. It just wipes it out, right? But in the more advanced kind of severe cases, what happens is that cytokine response, the inflammation process, right? The body gets so inflamed that it keeps sending out that cytokine response, and it creates a bad feedback loop, and there's more and more inflammation. It gets more and more inflamed. And that's what eventually results in pneumonia or like the acute respiratory distress, right? Or causing organs to fail and things like that, which is obviously sadly why people pass away from COVID, is that cytokine response turns into what some researchers call a cytokine storm. It's basically like a hurricane of these inflammatory markers, and it just basically overrides the system, and we get a big inflammatory response, and that causes a lot of damage. So
So the more fit an individual is, the better they're able to respond to the cytokine response and limit the ability for that to take over the whole body, right?
yeah, basically, exactly. Good point. So with that, it's hard to say with COVID specifically, but we know for influenza, since the flu's been around for a minute, that people that regularly exercise have a much less likelihood of basically like getting risk of abnormalities due to the flu. AKA, people handle the flu a lot better, more regularly that they exercise, right? So with that, I think the golden question here is, the big takeaway is that we've all had those days when you have a workout planned and so on, and you're just not feeling too hot, and you push through it anyway and go through. That can have its pros and cons. So being regularly fit is really important, and it can, from what we know from the flu, decrease your risk of having those adverse side effects, right? Like the really gnarly flu getting bad. But on the other end of that, if you are feeling ill, or if you overwork your system, right? If you're, let's say you just picked up a new job, you're moving, and you're still trying to keep up your normal training, and your training is pretty intense, that puts you at risk. So too much can also put you at risk. So it's this fine balance of associating with, using the hypervolt for muscle therapy. It's this fine balance of sleeping properly, eating well, all of those things, and not going too hard, but continuously, gradually adapting to the stimulus of exercise will help you not have as bad of a response to COVID-19.
So basically, to sum it up, moderate intensity is ideal, especially when you're losing sleep, you're stressed out. Everybody's got different things they're going through right now, or have been going through in the last year. It's important to just have a nice moderate intensity for the most part, so you don't really stress your body out too much.
Yeah, or compounding, like knowing that you have an intense day planned on the week. Let's say you go really hard on Monday, maybe Wednesday keep it light, and then maybe Friday have a moderate middle intensity day. Not going hard in the paint. I can only make it 3 times, so I'm just going to go all out every time I go, and that can really shunt the nervous system. So think about it as like overtraining in a way. You can overtrain in the current time. If you overtrain, like previously, we just think about the muscle damage, the hormonal damage, and the things that can happen. But now in this day and age, you also have the factor of your suppressed immune system puts you at a really high risk of a very deadly virus.
And what about the vaccine? How is the vaccine affecting the immune system if we know enough about that right now? Because everyone's saying like they're good after the first shot, and then the second one comes and they're jacked up about like 24 hours later from the second shot.
Right. You know, Joe, that's a really good question. I'm not an immunologist, but what I can share on is that, so as we talked about the mild and severe response,
Hmm.
really what the vaccine does is it creates that response of the body to be inflamed
Hmm.
when the COVID or SARS virus comes is not as inflammatory, if that makes sense. The response of the
Hmm.
body is
Yeah.
not as like massive. I'm going to dump these inflammatory molecules and like bundle this up and attack it.
Yeah.
It's a less. So therefore the symptoms are less, if that makes sense, from
Hmm.
the exposure. So you've already been exposed and already had a mild response to the virus.
Hmm.
Therefore, you're a lot less likely to get COVID-19, which is the actual acute respiratory illness that comes from SARS. Right?
Hmm.
Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, I guess. Or like I guess more like can the vaccine be like somewhat consequential to somebody's immune system if they like don't take if their immune system's like not very strong?
Yeah, good question. I think with at this day and age in modern technology, I think you're a lot less likely to have a negative response to the vaccine than you are if you don't have it and get exposed to the virus. If
Okay.
that makes sense. Like
Yeah, okay.
the percentage of people that have like, so I don't know the numbers on this, but the percentage of people that have like allergic reaction or like a negative reaction to the vaccine compared to the massive amounts of people that have died because of the virus
Hmm.
isn't even close in comparison, you know? It's
Hmm.
almost like the vaccine
Yeah.
is a incredibly minor risk, and if that, people aren't dying from the vaccine, they're getting like allergic reactions or an itch on their skin for a couple days and things
Hmm.
like that. It doesn't seem to be this like really bad thing compared to, we know for sure that SARS-CoV-2, right? Like COVID-19 is gnarly and it is taking people out, sadly. So
Hmm. Because I
it's
think
like
that's
if you,
like some of like the response, especially like from like the Black and Latino communities here in the Bay Area. You know, there's some of them are like afraid to take it because they're just like,
yeah,
I don't know, I don't trust it. I think this is gonna be something that just makes me sick in the
it
future.
makes
I've got all
sense.
these thoughts. It's gonna make us sick. So
Right.
and I'm like totally for it. So I just want to like do what we want to do, what we can to make people feel at ease with some of the things that are being recommended to us through the FDA and those people who are in
100%.
charge of that.
100%. I think the simplest way I could respond to that question is that it's a lot safer to take the vaccine than it is to not and
Hmm.
be at risk of getting the virus,
Hmm.
because you don't know if you're going to be a mild responder or a severe responder. Um, for example, my girlfriend, she was an ex Division One volleyball player, incredibly athletic.
Hmm.
She still has chest pain. She still has chest
Hmm.
pain from the virus, and this is an incredibly fit individual that we're talking about, right? So if if it were my loved ones, I would tell everybody to get the vaccine because I've seen COVID, I've had it. It is bad. It is
Hmm.
not the business that some of the media portrays it to be. They seem to focus on the, like low responder, so it's not that
Hmm.
bad. But if you are the one that gets it bad, it's real. And I
Yeah.
would highly suggest, it's scary. It's a new thing. It's a vaccine, but I think forecasting it might be like the flu vaccine. It might just be
Yeah.
something that people take every 2 years and
Hmm.
it becomes normalized in time. Anything new is scary. Change is
Yeah.
scary, but
For sure.
To take it home, I just want to make sure I've been getting these questions a lot in the last year, and there's no one better to respond to this question or give us a more detailed answer than a lot of people have been hitting me up saying, "Hey, is it best I do cardio right now, just like a lot of cardio to protect my lungs, from a virus like this, or is it best to do strength training or a mix of cardio and resistance training?" And the answer really is the mix, and you really want a muscle adaptation as well. And there's a lot more changes in your body that your body adapts to. There are more benefits you get from strength training, including cardiovascular fitness, right, Trevor?
yeah, definitely. When you break down fitness, I mean, there's five big key components. Three of the ones that we can touch on real quick. You have muscular endurance, muscular strength, and cardiorespiratory endurance. Those three big primary things. Um, it's incredibly important to do concurrent training. To put it in perspective, the ACSM, the biggest like health guides in the clinical XFIS world, suggest doing like 5 days a week of cardio and 3 days a week of strength training at a minimum, at specific intensities and so on. But doing both will be incredibly healthy to boost your immune system, because the stress that you go under when you put a barbell on your back is very different than the stress that you go through when your blood vessels vasodilate and you distribute blood and oxygen to all of your tissues and everything like that. Those stresses, one's a big bone stress, one's a big metabolic stress, one's a big muscular stress, one's a big like mental grit stress. So they each have their pros and cons. I would highly suggest doing a concurrent training model, which is both resistance training and cardio.
We did it right today, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely we did. We always do it right, Bryant. When you got a great, personal trainer like you, we always do it right.
We did some hill sprints. Joe got me,
nice.
Trevor. You're not surprised, but yeah, he got me.
Joe got the W.
He got the W in the sprint.
Oh no, I don't take W's. Yeah.
Well, Trevor, you're always producing W's. Thanks for being on the show, man. Thanks for gracing us and educating us with knowledge, and hopefully everybody can get a couple of tips on improving your immune system. I think the big takeaways are concurrent training, do a mixture of strength or resistance training and cardio, and as far as the inflammation response, the more fit you are, the better you can handle viruses like the flu and COVID.
And if you liked what you heard from Trevor, come back next week, listeners, because we're going to have a brand new podcast with our boy from Hawaii.
You don't want to miss. You don't want to miss the next episode. He's going to talk about performance and how it relates to bioenergetics. What does it mean? Well, you'll find out soon.
Boom. Why not now?
Why not you?